Last month, Alec Baldwin was charged with manslaughter from the 2021 shooting death of cinematographer 𝗦𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗂 on the set of Rust. You heard about this one? Probably, unless you're living under a rock. It was a Western that he was starring in and producing, and it all went south. So now he's scheduled for his initial appearance at the end of February, along with 𝗦𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗧, who was the armorer on set, who has also been charged with manslaughter. The armorer is the person who's like in charge of the guns, okay? I think a lot of people were pretty shocked to hear that Baldwin was handed such an aggressive charge as manslaughter, though others in the comments sections as I was doing my research were pretty critical of him and thought he deserved everything coming to him. My initial reaction when I first heard this story break in 2021 was honestly to feel bad for Alec, frankly, because my initial assumption was that it was accidental. It was like a prop someone had just handed him that went off, and now he has to live with that for the rest of his life. And like, part of me still feels that way, but as I was doing research for this, I realized it was a lot more complicated than that. But this also got me thinking about manslaughter generally. I think there are some misconceptions about manslaughter, and I think there's a lot to unpack around the varying degrees of culpability that we place on people when someone dies. So why was Alec charged with manslaughter here and not something else? What's the difference between this and murder and all of the levels in between? Let's talk about it. Roll the intro. Let me take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Listen, sorry, this isn't breaking news, but I need to tell you again, I hate cooking, okay? I don't want to do it. I don't want to think about what I'm gonna put in my body. I just want it to magically appear for me, but also I want to be able to eat it and not feel like crap afterwards, okay? This is why I keep partnering with Factor over and over, because they do just that. Their food is delicious, and it just magically appears on my doorstep. Fresh, never frozen, and I don't have to do anything other than heat it up, okay? When I'm busy delving into my research to bring you these high-quality videos, the last thing that I want to do is cook. It's great for keeping on track when you have the combo dilemma that I have, which is I want to eat healthy and feel good in my body, and also I am so lazy, I want the easiest path from point A to point B. And this year I'm continuing to focus on my health. If you've been following me on my other social media channels, you know that I've been learning more about my hormones and my body and using diet and nutrition to help improve how I feel day to day. And Factor helps me do that, and I genuinely love their food. It is tasty, okay? I love that there's no prep, there's no mess to clean up. I just pop it in the microwave, beep, bop, boop, done. Factor meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in 2 minutes. So I get to eat food that I know is fresh and healthy, but Factor also offers a really great variety of rotating weekly menu items of 25+ meal options. My latest favorite was this herb-crusted chicken with cauliflower mash, and I'm serious, they make a damn good cauliflower mash. I know it's like, why not just eat the potatoes? Because I like to hide my vegetables so that I don't know that I'm eating them, okay? And Factor does this well. The fact that I didn't have to cook this meal also, I cannot stress to you how much I love this for me. Factor's become my go-to lunch and dinner solution when I'm juggling a million things throughout my day and I don't have time to cook. They also have these delicious protein-rich smoothies that are really handy when I need to head out the door, but I know that I'm gonna need to refuel before I get home. Factor is now owned by HelloFresh, so with both brands, I really enjoy the flexibility of being able to cook conveniently with HelloFresh or grab and go with Factor. Love this for me. Head to factor75.com/Leeja50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Okay, so context is always helpful because the law depends on the facts. So let me give you some background on the Alec Baldwin Rust shooting situation so that we can properly deduce why he was charged with manslaughter here. So just the basics, okay? So in October 2021, Alec was on set to film his movie Rust, a Western being filmed at a ranch in New Mexico. 𝗦𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗧 was working as both the assistant prop master and also as the armorer, the person in charge of gun safety and maintenance on set. Hannah, however, was not present at the shooting on October 21st, 2021. On that day, Alec was inside of a church practicing a shot with the director of photography, 𝗦𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗧, and the film's director, Joel Souza. 𝗦𝗪𝗪 and Joel were behind the camera watching a monitor, doing a practice shot of Alec up close sitting in a church pew, and in the scene he had to draw the gun and cock it but not fire. And during the practice, he pulled the gun, pointed it at 𝗦𝗪𝗪, and then the gun went off, killing her and injuring the director. Did he pull the trigger? We don't know. The jury's gonna have to figure that out. But either way, the gun went off and now someone is dead. However, it's not that simple, of course, because there are many questions about how he came to have live rounds of ammunition in his hand, how the gun went off if he didn't pull the trigger, and who is ultimately responsible for the gun having gotten into his hand in the first place. But also, he pointed it directly at her, which is bad. So there's a lot of questions here. During the ensuing year-long investigation, a lot has come out about the way that safety and props were handled on set, which complicates the picture of who's guilty. But let's take a second first to understand the different types of homicide, what is manslaughter under the law, and how is it different from other types of homicide. And then I will complicate our understanding of homicide more with more background facts that just make this Russ case so much more difficult. Okay, so what is manslaughter? What is murder? Typically, a murder or manslaughter charge will be brought by the state, not the federal government. So each state has its own specific laws for homicide. However, when you're looking to figure out generally what the criminal law is on a matter, it can be helpful to refer to the Model Penal Code. Penal. Focus. AKA the MPC, Model Penal Code. The Model Penal Code, MPC, is a model for states to look to when creating their own criminal laws. It's written and updated by a body of many criminal law professionals and experts. So it's not an actual law, it's a model law for states to use to build their own laws. So it's helpful as a general overview of what's considered best practices for criminal statutes. The MPC has an umbrella category called criminal homicide, underneath which falls murder, manslaughter, and negligent homicide. Murder, the most serious of the three, is defined as follows. Criminal homicide constitutes murder when it is committed purposely or knowingly, or it is committed recklessly under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. Such recklessness and indifference are presumed if the actor is engaged or is an accomplice in the commission of a felony. Okay, so under the MPC, murder is either done on purpose or committed under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. Murder. That extreme indifference is assumed if you kill someone while also committing a felony. So if you're committing a felony like an armed robbery or something, and you accidentally kill someone during the commission of that crime, it's automatically considered murder, not manslaughter, even if it was an accident. Manslaughter, on the other hand, so you got murder, manslaughter, is defined as follows. Criminal homicide constitutes manslaughter when it is committed recklessly, or a homicide which would otherwise be murder is committed under the influence of extreme mental or emotional disturbance for which there is reasonable explanation or excuse. Okay, so unlike murder, manslaughter is committed recklessly, meaning with conscious disregard of a substantial and unjustifiable risk of death. But it rises to murder if the recklessness is so reckless that it manifests extreme disregard for the value of human life. And a murder charge can be downgraded to manslaughter if it was committed under extreme mental or emotional disturbance. Yes, these are really arbitrary words, and yes, it is confusing, okay? And then the lowest level is negligent homicide, which is defined as follows. Criminal homicide constitutes negligent homicide when it is committed negligently. Oh God, I hate the law. Okay. Meaning the person should be aware of a substantial and unjustifiable risk that the danger of death exists or will result from his conduct. Okay, so you got murder, extreme indifference to risk. Manslaughter, conscious disregard of risk. And negligent homicide, should be aware of the risk. Those are the three levels of homicide in the MPC. And if you're like, Leeja, what about first-degree murder? What about second-degree murder? Yeah, the Model Penal Code doesn't have those, but many, many states do, and therein lies the crux of why studying criminal law in law school is so goddamn confusing, because you have to learn with this model and what it says, but then also what actual states say. So this trial is happening in New Mexico, so let's see what New Mexico has to say. In New Mexico, there is both first and second degree murder. First degree murder is found where the killing falls under one of three categories. 1, it was premeditated, or 2, it happened during the commission of or an attempt to commit a felony, or 3, it was committed by any act greatly dangerous to the lives of others, indicating a depraved mind regardless of human life. Okay, so that's basically the same type of indifference to human life as we saw in the MPC. That's first degree murder. Second degree murder is found where the killing happens when the perpetrator is performing acts which he knows create a strong probability of death or great bodily harm. Okay, and then New Mexico has two types of manslaughter. So you got murder, murder 1, murder 2, and then two types of manslaughter, voluntary and involuntary manslaughter. Voluntary manslaughter is interesting. I've always found this weird carve out to be very strange and antiquated. A lot of states have this. In New Mexico, the statute for voluntary manslaughter says that it consists of manslaughter committed upon a sudden quarrel or in the heat of passion. This is weirdly common in states. So basically, it's giving you a lesser charge, not murder, but instead manslaughter, if you committed the murder upon a sudden quarrel or in the heat of passion. So like the example that I remember being taught in law school is like, you walk in on your partner in bed with another person and you're so blinded by passion and rage that you kill the person in bed with your partner. And then you get a lesser sentence than murder. Like, I don't know. Typically when someone's so reactionary as to be homicidally violent, we put them in at least anger management, send them to therapy. But if it's murder, we give them some benefit of the doubt. I don't know, it's wild to me, okay? So that's voluntary manslaughter. And then there's involuntary manslaughter, and this is what Alec Baldwin is charged with. In New Mexico, involuntary manslaughter happens in two ways. Either one, where the killing is committed while the perpetrator is also committing another crime, which doesn't amount to a felony. Because remember, if death happens during the commission of a felony, then it's first-degree murder. So like if you're robbing a bank and you accidentally kill someone, probably gonna be first-degree murder. But if you're trespassing and then accidentally kill someone, it would be more likely to be involuntary manslaughter because trespassing is not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. Okay, so that's one way. Or involuntary manslaughter occurs where the killing happens during a lawful act, but which might produce death in an unlawful manner or without due caution and circumspection. And they're charging Alec with both, actually. They're saying that it was a killing during the commission of a crime that was not a felony, saying that the crime that he was committing was negligent use of a deadly weapon. So he was committing a crime by negligently using a deadly weapon, and death resulted from that. So that's one way that they're trying to charge him. Or in the alternative, so if the jury doesn't think that's what was happening, then they're charging him with the second part, the killing during a lawful act without due caution. Basically, he wasn't being careful, he was being negligent. The two charges just depend on the level of negligence. Was he actively committing the crime of negligence when the death happened? Or did the death occur because of his negligence? It's a little difficult to draw the lines there, but basically they're giving these two charges so that the jury has two options to choose from when sentencing him or when charging him. University of New Mexico law professor Joshua Kastenberg in an interview says that involuntary manslaughter in the commission of a lawful act is used to hold people accountable for doing things that an ordinary, prudent adult would know better than to do. Like, for example, not pointing a gun at someone unless you're absolutely sure it's unloaded and safe. Involuntary manslaughter in New Mexico comes with up to 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. However, if involuntary manslaughter was committed with a firearm, there's an automatic sentencing enhancement that carries a mandatory 5-year prison sentence. So if Alec Baldwin is found guilty, the sentence would have to be at least 5 years. However, I did read some experts say he probably won't actually serve that amount of time because apparently the judge has some discretion here. I'm not an expert in New Mexico law, so I cannot confirm or deny. Okay, so that's the modern law and how it applies to Alec Baldwin's case, but I don't know, I'm a big old nerd, and I was like, why is there a difference between murder and manslaughter? Where did this come from? How did we develop what I've always found to be kind of an arbitrary and hard to nail down levels of guilt and assign different names to each? So yeah, I went down the rabbit hole of the history of murder law. Please come along with me. I promise, it's interesting, okay? I found this article from 1950 titled Historical Development of Manslaughter. That was pretty enlightening. So first we have to start back in ye olde England, because if you didn't know, much of our laws stem from English law because, you know, colonization. This article from 1950 said, from a very early date, all homicides were treated from a purely objective point of view, and punishment was not for the crime as we think of it today, but was for revenge of the kin of the deceased. Homicide subjected the slayer to blood feud at the hands of the deceased's kindred. See, I told you this would be fun. But the wrong against such kindred might be remedied by a money payment. Even in these early times, the slayer could show that the homicide was a misadventure, meaning accident, or self-defense, then his payment was less. The author goes on to say that toward the other extreme of the law of homicide were secret slayings by ambush, waylaying, or secret methods. Morth was the word used to describe all secret crimes. Morth, in its Latinized form, murdrum, came to be synonymous with secret killing, which was always considered a heinous crime. Murdrum, Get it? By the 1300s, the connection between murdrum and malice aforethought emerged. Malice aforethought is a fun phrase for premeditated, basically. Did they think about it ahead of time? The distinction between murder and manslaughter developed over centuries, and it's best explained by the passage in the year 1604 of a law called the Statute of Stabbing, which is one of my favorite titles for a statute, and I would like to challenge our Congress to start being a bit more creative with their statute names. The Statute of Stabbing. It provided that if any person stabbed any person that hath not any weapon drawn, or that hath not then first stricken the party, and they died within 6 months as a result, that person would suffer the death penalty. Under that same statute, manslaughter required a defendant to prove a sudden quarrel or provocation. So yes, we can trace the weird voluntary manslaughter statute in New Mexico that allows for a lesser defense if the murder is committed by sudden quarrel or heat of passion to 1600s Old English law. And this is why legal history is so fun for me. What does this have to do with Alec Baldwin? Well, nothing. Okay, I just thought it was really interesting. But also, it's illustrative of how guilt has been dealt with throughout the centuries and how it plays a central role in our understanding of homicide today. And it plays a central role in this case as well because there are so many layers to what happened. It's going to take a trial and lots of witness testimony and a lot of jury deliberation to determine what level of culpability Alex should be held to. He's certainly not the only one who's potentially guilty. There's of course his co-defendant, 𝗦𝗫𝗓𝗓, who didn't fire the gun, but could be found negligent for not taking precautions with the prop. There's also the people who've been charged and have taken plea agreements, David Halls, specifically the first assistant director, who actually physically handed Baldwin the gun that day. He took a plea agreement and pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge of negligent use of a deadly weapon. There's also the evidence that 𝗬𝗫𝗓𝗓 had asked for more time to work on her armorer duties as opposed to her assistant prop duties to ensure safety. There are the texts that she sent to 𝗬𝗫𝗡𝗥𝗓𝗡, the line producer, warning of safety concerns. The email that Gabrielle then sent back saying that she's paying too much attention to armorer and not supporting props enough. There are the multiple misfires that happened on set in the weeks leading up to the killing. Multiple times, guns accidentally went off on set before that day. No one was hurt, but like, that doesn't look good, okay? There's the fact that the day before the killing, a bunch of camera crew walked off set because of the unsafe conditions. So that on the day of the killing, they were starting late and had a new set of camera crew that they were trying to work with to replace the ones that had walked off the set. 𝗦𝗫𝗓𝗓𝗓 is 25 years old. She's the daughter of a very well-known armorer in Hollywood. And so there's some questions about whether or not she was even prepared to have taken on this role, though a ton of other professionals turned down the role before her because the role necessitated that the person be both an assistant props master and the armorer and divide their time between the two. And most professionals were like, hell no, I'm not getting involved with that. So it's like, we got up and down the line a lot of things, a lot of shortcomings, a lot of bad actors and bad acts that had to come together to make this happen. I'm honestly not sure why Alec didn't take a plea deal. It might be that they have some compelling evidence against him. I don't know why 𝗦𝗫𝗓𝗓𝗓 didn't take a plea deal. I'm not really sure. But this whole story indicates to me that there are some industry standards when it comes to handling weapons on set, but that perhaps there is an issue in the industry where people are just trying to get movies out and are willing to cut corners in dangerous ways to make it happen. So the through line of guilt likely goes beyond Hannah and Alec, but they are the ones being pinned with it because they were closest to the accident and the easiest to draw conclusive legal culpability to. That's the problem with legal culpability, is there has to be a pretty clear line. Even if theoretically on a larger scale we could argue that there are reasons to believe that the industry as a whole is somewhat at fault, that's not really a legal argument, all right? That's not a conclusive enough line, which is why Alec and Hannah are the ones on trial for this now. So at trial, Alec is going to need to show not just that he didn't know that the gun was loaded, but also the jury's going to have to decide whether Alec should have taken steps to ensure that it was unloaded. Like, was it unreasonable of him to have not checked? And that's going to depend a lot on the facts that come out at trial. What is the industry standard here? Was it not followed? What did others do on that day? Would he have any reason to believe there would be live rounds in the gun, etc.? And the prosecution filed a witness list for the preliminary hearing, and there are 44 different names on that list, and that's just for the preliminary hearing, not the trial. Of course, all 44 will probably not be called at the pretrial initial hearing, but this is going to be a fact-heavy case. I think that it's going to hinge a lot on whether or not the jury thinks, beyond a reasonable doubt, that based on the evidence, Alec Baldwin acted negligently. Again, that initial hearing is February 24th. From there, we'll probably see some trial dates scheduled. It might end up settling outside of court if he decides he wants to take a plea deal, but for right now, we're just kind of waiting to see how this unfolds. Thanks again to Factor for partnering with me on today's video. Reminder to go to factor75.com/Leeja50 for 50% off your first order. Thanks to my Patreon supporters, my royal patrons 𝗦𝗪𝗏𝗏, 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝗏, Hellenelle, Leeta, May Danger, and Rachel, and my extra special multi-platinum patron, 𝗦𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. If you liked this video, then you might also like this video where I answer the question, why are people allowed to represent themselves? Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.